Thank you, first of all, for having me. I appreciate it. I wanted to say to Kellyanne that opening video like knocked me over because I'm a huge Al Jarreau fan. Like you wouldn't know that, right? But huge. And some of the guys that recorded with him like have become like friends of mine. And when I was in college, a few of those same guys on those albums were like my teachers. I remember I was on tour with Esperanza Spalding, and Al Jarreau was the opening act for. We were the opening act for Al Jarreau. So like just seeing him in person was crazy because I had already had like L is for Lovers and the title album, just Al Jarreau with Morning, and I have Breaking Away. You know, that's one of my favorite ones where he's got the video of, you know, it was on Sesame Street. They actually aired that video like on, that was, yeah, he's the real thing. So that totally just, man, it just erupted. Like I was over here screaming, like I'm surprised the phone wasn't shaking because I mean, just he's amazing. But thank you for that. And I really did resonate with what you were saying. It's too much for me to unpack right now, but yeah, you were knocking down all kind of, you know, real serious subjects that, you know, I like the frequency of the way they're being covered now. I think people are in general getting to be more nutritious, or at least like pursuing a direction that is healthier for them. So some of the, you know, innovative or like things that you're pioneering are, you know, very, very inspiring.
I like that you said the word healthy, because that's what it is about, developing the health of our brain and our experiences. So thank you for that feedback.
Oh, cheers. My pleasure. My pleasure. So I guess what I'm going to do is I'm much less tech savvy, especially when it comes to phones, because my phone is usually overloaded with like audio and like things that I have to learn for music. So most of everything I'm going to give is just like organic personal offering. Eventually I'm going to play some. This is my instrument. This is a Keith Roscoe 5-string. I'm a multi-instrumentalist. So just some background on me. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. I was born in a very nice Jewish hospital, Sinai Hospital. A lot of me and my friends were born there. It's a great hospital on Northern Parkway. And so I was born there. I started elementary school as basically where I started learning music formally. I'm a full-time musician, educator, and producer. And I guess I'll unravel some of that in the coming moments. But to get back to the beginning, so sorry about that. Basically, I started out playing music really heavily in like elementary school and church. But both of my parents were like fervent Christians, preachers, everything. And so I had a natural inclination to the drums, just the vibration, you know, just the kinetic energy that was involved with it. It just was very stimulating. It was like just one of those things I couldn't keep my eyes off it. I couldn't figure out how to like not see drums as the center of everything that was happening in church. So that's the beginning. And then I started in elementary school, like learning how to read, you know, so then dealing in the mathematical part of music, how I didn't know later on how supernatural it, you know, the application of math would be in my experiences as a jazz musician. So fast forward to college, and I get accepted to Berklee College of Music. So then I start there with a film scoring degree. Well, that was at least what I was pursuing at the time. And then it changed to professional music. And through that, I basically was opened up to like everything music, including the mathematical part, starting to learn that chords and scales, just the way they're used and executed, can evoke emotion. I would find people writing, songwriters, who they weren't even connected to the emotion that was in the song. Like some of them were like dealing with a breakup. It's like their first year away from their high school first love. So they're sort of in despair, and then they're in this new position where, you know, they're making all the decisions for themselves. They're not really with their parents anymore. they're who they say they are as far as anyone else is concerned. You know, this everybody's first time meeting everybody. And to watch people be so good at the science of music that they could create emotions that they don't have, you know, like talking about being in love with someone and being like super happy and understanding the kind of chords you need to use to create the vibration for that, even though them at the moment naturally aren't able to produce that emotion exactly. So a lot of great producers that we know, and this is getting back to the how the science and uh, you know, every element of it comes together when it comes to the math part. Because you have great producers and we see them, they're like, man, why is that guy living like that? You know, why is he not, he writes the most beautiful music, but he kind of lives a tough life, you know, or he lives rough. He's not so nutritious to himself. And in reality, this is a person that has become married to the very scientific part of the music, where they're able to create things vibrationally based on patterns, based on, I'm going to use these chords. This particular chord feels like hope. They can then marry the emotional content that they feel is relative to the vibration of this chord in progression with other chords that have their own emotion, which eventually tells a story. Now, getting to the phrasing part of things is how we speak. You have spoken language like I'm speaking now, but it's really comprised of a ton of rhythms. So I can say everything I'm saying rhythmically without it being words. It's like da 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 da. That was literally, I can say things rhythmically, you know, without it being words. I took the phrase that carried the words. So that's what phrasing is. Phrasing is when you take all these really small ingredients and you create a conglomerate of these ingredients. And when you put them together, and you start from the beginning and you go through the whole vibrational field to the end, that is a phrase. That's when you actually have all these little pieces that come together to make up a word, you know. And since we deal in music as a language, phrases are the building blocks. You know, phrasing is why the words they do, you know. So it can become a very kind of, it can become a very scientific situation without there actually having any scope on how emotionally to be connected to anything. So I found myself in college really being faced with something different than what drew me to music, which was just an intrinsic interest in the sounds. Like when you see Al Jarreau and the fact that he's capable of so many sounds and so many, like he's a percussionist, he's a horn player, he's a violinist, he's like an orator, he's like a court jester, he's a lawyer, he's the dude outside trying to sell you some, you know, basketball tickets, you know what I'm saying? It's like he's just all those people on the mic and he's just like, you know, then he's an eagle, you know, it's like you just hear all these sounds, you know, so, you know, and sometimes I wonder, even looking at him as an older gentleman, when I saw him, you know, when we opened for him, he was so old, he was so much different than, you know, he was back when he was doing the record like Glow, like that was like 70s, you know, but to see him be able to produce those things that those records are made of. And I'm like, I know you're not living like that anymore. You know, like there's no way you could be living the same tempo and that same response to life and rhythm as you were when you were writing these songs in the 70s, because that's like a super young, healthy guy. He looked like an Olympian on the video that Miss Kellyanne, you know, posted. So it's like, man, you can't be, how are you able to produce and invoke the same emotion within the music that makes the storyline what it literally is? Like, how are you able to go back? You don't have as much strength. You can't get from one side of the stage to the other side. One of his ears, he was completely deaf. And I mean, it's just like to even think about that, like, wow, you actually don't even hear in one of your ears, and you're still able to somehow project this authentic stamp of your emotional content, like where you're never going to be different than you always were. You're just less capable in certain departments. So it's really something to, when you bring up the patterns and how people respond to music, or you were talking inclusion, people that have different, clearly to me, just responses to life. People are using different ingredients, because learning's not linear. Everybody learns as they need. Some people are just starting to pay taxes. Some people say, hey, you were supposed to know that a long time ago. But based on their lifestyle, the demand for them to know it is like now. So that's pretty much an umbrella explanation of how I arrived at, the moment I am now. And right now, my career is like, it's really, I don't want to say insane. I mean, I feel like the pandemic only fortified some things that I needed to work on, or just some doors I needed to open. But, recently I've been playing like bass and drums almost the same amount in both, and it's like interesting, like the dynamic when you're in a studio or when you're in a working situation. When I'm a drummer, it's like most people are like, yeah, man, we'll call you when we need a beat. Thanks, man. Did you check out the music? Cool. So they're just like, yeah, just come and do that thing to the music. When I'm playing bass, it seems like there's more concern about the musical input. There's more just like, well, what kind of patterns would what kind of bass line, what kind of pattern are you going to create as a counter pattern to what's already been written? And so, I'm thank you for that. That was sweet to say. So figuring out counterpoint. Now, I hadn't really gotten into like classical music when I was in school, but I did go to school with conductors and people that were arrangers, and they did, they wanted me to come and play their arrangements for their recitals. So like, hey man, I wrote this really crazy arrangement. I want you to play drums on it. I want it to be crazy. I wrote all this stuff. And, so I'm playing my friends' arrangements, and I'm realizing like the counterpoint, like the counter rhythms, and here's this kind of phrase, and here's this other kind of phrase. Like you have polyrhythms, you have 2 and 3, like you can go 1 against 2. So you say 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the idea behind counterpoint. 2 different identities, phrase-wise and rhythmically, working together to create just one singular idea. So once you feel that groove, you're not just feeling da 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 da. You're feeling da da uh, uh, both at the same time are. So that actually feels like West Africa. That feels like Brazil. That feels like where a lot of our relatives are. When you hear that rhythm and syntax language, you start to see how rhythmically, mathematically, all of this stuff really comes into play. Even just culturally, like there's certain rhythms that I could play around like my West African friends, and they're like, hey bro, that's like Mali, man, you're doing this very specific thing, and this is ceremonial thing, but I don't know how you know this, and then you have like some of the Cuban percussionists, and they're telling you it's African, but they've created some whole other innovation to it where it's for the way they dance. That's actually the way it's designed. So they contort and change the shape of the language to be specific to their, again, response to life. So you'll see different cultures using the same claves, or basically dealing in the same cadences to produce whatever result that they want. And that goes back to it being scientific. This is all patterns, it's all math. But when you keep grinding and putting those patterns together, eventually they work together to create a conglomerate of an idea. Like even a note, if you hear one note from my instrument, right? Okay, this is a harmonic. It's like a false note. Okay, it's not a actual note. Okay, it's based on the physics of the vibration between where the strings are connected and where they're harnessed. Okay, so even one note, your ear can't detect it, but but to make one note, you need millions of you need basically millions of harmonics to like a chromosome, and they basically wrap around each other. And by the time you hear the note, or by the time your ear is able to perceive the vibration, it's just a note. But it took several harmonics to make it up. It's like a thread. You know, when you look at a piece of lanyard or a thread, you think it's just a string, but when you look closely, it's like very many strings that are just wrapped together really tightly. Okay, so that's when you're getting a note and you hear any kind of note, understand that that's like a myriad of harmonics that are wrapped together. And by thank y'all. This is really inspiring today.